The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Lord Football is stretching, getting ready to come out of his hibernation and get the real football season started. I believe the number is 24 days. It starts on a Thursday, and it goes until mid-February, and before long it's going to be late February, and who knows, it may bleed into March Madness. Football owns the sports world. Professional football, especially, though college football is awfully big. So we're going to talk about the end of the exhibition season. 2 games left for the Commanders in that, both of them at home. Also, Tom Brady had some interesting things to say to Joel Klatt yesterday. We will get to that. And a whole lot more, including what was the most devastating injury ever seen on an NFL football field. It happened 47 years ago today, an exhibition game in Oakland between the Raiders and the New England Patriots. It was Jack Tatum hitting Darryl Stingley, whose life was immediately changed. Darryl Stingley spent the rest of his life as a quadriplegic with limited use of his right hand, and Jack Tatum continued his football career. Both of them are now gone, and we will look back on the many backstories behind what happened on that day, August 12th of 1978. I did want to mention that I watched last night, a little catch-up after vacation. I think this was last week. The new episode, I believe, drops tonight on HBO. Hard Knocks. It's been pretty much a staple for me at this time of year that you watch the Hard Knocks of training camp to, kind of fill the time until we get real football. And by and large, over the years, I've enjoyed it. If you don't remember, it started in 2001 with the defending champion Baltimore Ravens. And it was really good at the time because it took you behind the scenes of training camp. You heard training camp stories before, but you never really saw, full documentary of what it was like. Actually, if you want to go back to the 1960s, there was a movie called Paper Lion, which was based on a book by George Plimpton. And Alan Alda played George Plimpton, who had arranged to participate in training camp with the Detroit Lions so he could write about it. That was Plimpton's deal, that he would participate in the sport. He once boxed Archie Moore. He once threw pitches, I believe, to Willie Mays. He wanted to get in on it to get the real feel of what it was like so he could write about it. So he wrote the book Paper Lion, and they turned that into a movie. And that was, as close as we saw to what training camp was, though it was dramatized for a movie. They did have real football players in it, including Alex Karras and John Gordy and a bunch of guys who played for the Lions. So it was as realistic as it could get. But in 2001, with the NFL Films and HBO getting involved, you really got behind the scenes. And the good thing about the Ravens was they had a bunch of characters on the team, like Tony Saragusa. They had Shannon Sharp. They had a number of veterans who had participated, not just in that Super Bowl, but in many seasons before that. And Brian Billick, who started out his career as the PR director of the San Francisco 49ers. He loved media attention, loved the cameras, and you got a real feel of what the drudgery of training camp was like. Well, over the years, we've seen it all. And they've had the Cowboys on a few times. And when they do have Dallas, it's usually dominated by Jerry Jones, becomes the Jerry Jones Show. And by the way, there's another Dallas Cowboys documentary dropping, I believe, this week on Netflix, which I'm sure is going to be dominated by Jerry Jones. But I watched the first episode of the Buffalo Bills. It is as dull as dishwater. I mean, there's really nothing there. It's Josh Allen reporting to camp. Okay, great. Josh Allen's the MVP. It shows them going through a padded practice. They got Thurman Thomas on the sidelines, one of the legends of the past. And, he says, hey, it's a big deal that they're going to have a padded practice. We used to have 2-a-days. We used to practice in pads twice a day. What's the big deal here? So there was that. And, overall, I just felt like it was a lot of training camp on-field video of drills, and hey, that's a really nice pass from Josh Allen wearing a baseball hat and shorts. I mean, let's see what happens when there's a pass rush. And there's, the backstories of the player who's trying to make his way back. You always have those kind of things that you follow. But I think it's run its course. I can't find anything that would make Hard Knocks compelling enough to go, oh, when's the next episode? When can I watch that? Nah, it's just more stuff. It's more NFL. And the thing about the NFL is no matter what you put on, I mean, it can be, a defensive lineman picking his teeth, people will watch. So I don't think they're going to end the series, but the amount of money and time that goes into making that, for that, it seems like a waste. It's just more of what you've seen. And I don't even think they go through the part about cutting players anymore. That used to be sort of compelling. They did the Giants last year, and really – well, actually, it was the Giants in the off-season. That was really the only headline from Hard Knocks. I don't even remember who the team was for the training camp Hard Knocks, but the off-season Hard Knocks was the Giants. And the main takeaway soundbite, is from John Mara, the owner of the team, who says, I don't want to have nightmares of Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia. Well, Saquon Barkley goes to Philadelphia, and the Eagles win the Super Bowl. So there was that from the offseason. But, yeah, by and large, it's just not that great anymore. And over the years, since 2001, the Commanders have always been able to avoid this. And part of the way they've been able to avoid it is they change coaches so often. That's one of the ways that you don't have to be on Hard Knocks if you have changed coaches in the offseason. If you don't make the playoffs, they can force you to do it, assuming there aren't enough volunteers. And obviously with Buffalo last year, they made it to, I believe, the AFC Championship game, so they could have turned it down, but they're on. But if they did away with Hard Knocks, it wouldn't really faze me that much. Anyway, Commanders are doing a kind of a spring game today. They're calling it the Burgundy and Gold scrimmage. So you've got the first team offense with the second team defense. I believe that's the Burgundy team. And then the second team offense with the first team defense. On the Gold team, this was the idea of Dan Quinn, kind of breaking up the monotony of training camp. Also, if you watched any of the exhibition game in New England over the weekend, they were flat. They were just flat. So this is a way to kind of spice things up, and you have players saying, this is not going to be patty cake, a little bit of trash talking, and Frankie Louvu said something about the game that it's not going to be friendly, all that kind of thing. But it's really just to break up the monotony of training camp. And Dan Quinn was asked yesterday, it's kind of one of these broad questions that you don't hear, but actually is a really worthy of an answer. What is the preseason all about?
The development of the youngest players who need the most experience. That's like, let's put that in category A. First game, usually you see trying too hard, been waiting so long to do it, and then they get back to it. Okay, it's just football. I've been doing that, and it kind of settles down into it, and usually you see like the preseason game 1 to game 2 feeling more comfortable. I also love for the players that may not be in the starting roles to show, very rarely is every position group playing, all the way through with, is a clean season, but it's that demonstrated ability, like to see it in the game. And certain positions are even more valuable than others for that evaluation, like a running back or an offensive or defensive lineman, because it is in more control here where did the guy make the tackle or not? Is he able to, full-on blitz pickup or not? So those help because it gives you demonstrated evaluation in that spot. And then for the guys that will play a lot, it is important to get the full speed timing, the connections down, the communication. It just kind of heightens up some. So to me, there's like 3 different buckets of players: the first-year players who are going into the NFL, the players who are fighting for roster spots, as backups and developmental. And then for the guys that are going to play a lot and some starters to say, okay, this is an important part of it to get your timing and your readiness really together. So 3 different spots. That's why we try to customize it, which it can be a little tricky to do that. Who needs what? We try to give a lot of practice time to some players and then not as much to others, and then a lot of game. And then this week it won't be exactly the same as well. So I try to do it on an individual basis as much as I can to think of each player's readiness and also what do we need to see from them?
So that is the Dan Quinn philosophy on training camp, and breaking it up a little bit today with this scrimmage that they're going to have. One of the things he's dealing with is injuries in the offensive line, and if you talk about this year, it's all as about Jaden Daniels in year 2. I'll get to a Jason Lockenfora column on that in just a moment, but the protection that he's going to get this year, it could have been a little bit better last year. They made some investments this year. They've got Laramie Tunsil, who they traded for with Houston, making a lot of money, due to make a lot of money in this next contract. He's been brought in. Sam Cosme, there's some outside shot that he can be ready for the opener. I don't know how. He ripped up his knee in the second playoff game last year. It doesn't seem like he'd be ready to go. So they're out. They're without certain players, a number of players on the offensive line as they go through this. Quinn is trying to put the best face on this, asked about it by John Keim.
There's concern. I like the group, though, John, and it starts with communication. What does the guard and tackle say on a combination block? What's the center and the guard? What's the tight end? How is that going? That part's just a regular standard. Boom, this is how we do it. What you're missing on when you're not all the way together, sometimes it's the nonverbal cues that you're just, when you're working side by side with somebody, we've all been there, you just kind of step into a rhythm together. So you have to be really intentional about those communications. They spend, obviously, the meeting times together, even when they're injured. But being in the moment when it happens really quickly, that's a big deal. And we'll continue to work hard to find our spaces to do it. It does happen a lot. We're not, very often. I don't know many through the league. You guys would know throughout a whole season how many times does, one line play the whole time. Not that often, especially as the, extended games. So going through ones like now and today, and where different people are in and different voices, I don't mind it. I'd welcome it because it allows different chances. And you do want to find out who can shine in those spots, John, because they may not be a starter, and they know that, but I can also show I can be a backup with limited reps with that person and still produce at a high level. So there's an opportunity, but you do have to go take it.
Remember this? It was probably 2017 that they had a bunch of injuries on the offensive line, and they were bad. And they had to sign players, some of them at the last minute, to the point where they were playing a game in Seattle, and some of the linemen were introducing themselves to each other in the locker room before the game at Seattle. Somehow they won that game. Kirk Cousins was still the quarterback then. They kept them upright enough to win at Seattle in 2017. So, yeah, he's right. You have to, make allowances for guys being out during the season, and maybe there's some practice on that. But, as you get your timing down, and especially for this next exhibition game, which is, I'm sure, the only time we're going to see Jaden Daniels play, you'd like to have as healthy an offensive line as possible. What you're not going to have is the backup, Marcus Mariota. He's not going to participate in today's scrimmage, and I would think it's highly unlikely that he will see any time against the Bengals in Monday night's exhibition game. He has been in and out of practice. They're not specific about the injury. This is all Dan Quinn would say yesterday.
Yeah, I wish he was out here all the time, but I know that he's able to throw. He's working to the side, and we're getting closer. We're just not there yet.
You may not remember this, but last year in the opening game, where it was in Tampa, and this is the game where I thought, Jaden Daniels ain't going to last. He's just taking too many hits, and he took one hit, which looked like it broke his rib. He only missed one play. Remember this? Jeff Driscoll came in because Mariota was hurt for the first couple of games, maybe first 3 games. And what Mariota did, later in the season to step in and win the game against Carolina in a blowout and step in other places and win that last game against Dallas. So, I don't think it's a big concern right now. But you would like to have your backup quarterback available, and you would like to have him, have some timing in the preseason, but it seems unlikely that's going to happen. Anyway, speaking of Jaden Daniels, the narrative that you've heard and has been talked about, ever since last season ended, well, what about the regression? C.J. Stroud, he was great, too, as a rookie. Wasn't bad last year, but took a step back. Team was 10-7. They did make the playoffs, but the big step up never happened, and it was kind of a step back for C.J. Stroud. So Jason Lockenfora, who writes for the Post, also does a radio show in Baltimore. You hear him on the Tony Kornheiser show all the time. He wrote about this, and he talked to a bunch of executives around the league. And his takeaway was Daniels may be too good to doubt. Too good to doubt. And he's got a quote here from a head coach who says, I know everyone is talking about them regressing. He said, but so does that mean if they don't get back to the NFC Championship game, they've regressed? I can tell you this much. Jaden is not going to regress. I don't look at it that way at all, not the way he plays the position. He's been so impressive since he got to LSU with his anticipation throws, his timing throws, his rhythm, the way he goes through his progressions. He knows how to miss knockout blows when he leaves the pocket and how to slip punches. He can protect himself a lot more than a guy like Robert Griffin III did when he was there. That's for sure. That was part of the undoing of Griffin. More from the coach. He said he's more like Lamar Jackson. He's a real dude, man. That guy, I love him, man. Love watching him play, listening to him talk. He has a real humility. He knows how to authentically connect with his locker room. He's the real deal. They aren't regressing too much with that quarterback. Another GM said that Daniels is way better than Stroud. Jaden is always working, and the expectation's in a different spot this year, like Houston last year, but they will be a solid operation there, meaning Washington. And then Lockenfora talks about the offensive line play, which plays into what's going on now with the injuries that they have. And Lockenfora writes, Houston's atrocious offensive line play undermined Stroud in year 2. And offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick went from getting head coach attention to being out of a job. Slowick failed to cultivate a quick passing game and horizontal screens to offset personnel shortcomings. Commanders offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury still has more detractors in the league, but is far more accomplished and experienced. Stroud got hit more than any quarterback in the league last year. You know, I'm not a big Kingsbury guy. This particular executive says, but he won't let that happen. He said he had watched the Arizona Cardinals offenses closely when Kingsbury was the coach. They will slide and shift and change protections and make adjustments. Daniels is only going to get better. And then there's a high-ranking official in the NFC East who tells Lockenfora, I completely get the instinct that they are this year's Houston, meaning Washington. With the obvious similarities and weaker schedule and no expectations, now it's the opposite. But they still have special human capital accumulating in that building compared to what it was and compared to a lot of organizations now. Yeah, it's not just that it's night and day since the Snyder years. This is compared to other organizations, good organizations around the league. He referenced Dan Quinn, General Manager Adam Peters, Assistant GM Lance Newmark, and Dave Gardy, the Senior Vice President of Football Initiative. So, the takeaway, once again, from Lockenfora in all of this is that there will not be a drop-off, that Daniels might be too good to doubt. Now, there is that phrase, too big to fail, maybe too good to doubt. Could be one of them, and we'll look back a year from now and go, oh, boy, we really jumped into the pool a little bit too quickly on that. Let's pump the brakes and temper our expectations. But that is the look that Lockenfora has in his column today. Coming up, all this Shedeur Sanders stuff. Like, oh, told you so, he was really good. Or, come on, it's the first exhibition game. What are you getting so excited about? Chase Daniel used to play quarterback in the league, or used to be on teams as a quarterback, didn't play much, but now is working for The Athletic, and he was on yesterday on the Rich Eisen show after breaking down the tape of the Shedeur Sanders preseason debut. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
47 years ago today, in an exhibition game, while stretching for a pass over the middle from Steve Grogan, Darryl Stingley collided with Jack Tatum and never walked again. It was the most devastating on-field injury in the history of the NFL, and it remains that way 47 years later. And the backstory of that, the follow-up, all the things that went on after that injury are worth looking back on, and we'll do that coming up in about an hour. Chase Daniel was once with the Washington football team, was once a Redskin, briefly, after completing his career at Missouri, where he was a Heisman Trophy candidate. He went undrafted because of his size. Now, I think he was listed at 6 feet when he played. I met him at a Super Bowl when he was playing for New Orleans. This was probably the same year that he was drafted, or the same year that he was taken in as an undrafted free agent and released by Washington. He signed on with New Orleans and was actually the third-string quarterback. He was behind Mark Brunell and, of course, Drew Brees, who wound up beating the Colts in that Super Bowl. But I looked him right in the eye. And actually, he's, I think, shorter than I was. Now I'm down to about 5'8" now. I think I was about 5'9" then. And I looked him right in the eye. But God bless him. Chase Daniel hung around the NFL for 14 years. I think he only made 4 or 5 starts. He played a lot of exhibition football and spent a lot of time in meeting rooms looking at game plans, preparing to play if needed, but more importantly, being ready to help with whatever is needed, on the sidelines with the starting quarterback at the time. And he played probably for 10 teams. So he was around the league. He was some great coaches, great quarterbacks. And rather than going to coaching, which I think would, he'd be well prepared to do, he's done some broadcasting, he's done some podcasting, he's done some writing, and he does film breakdown like, a lot of these guys who played can do. Chris Cooley used to do this when we worked at the other station. They're skilled enough to do this. So Chase Daniel took a look at Shedeur Sanders' preseason performance. Now, this was a game against the Lions that was actually suspended because of a severe injury on the field, but we did get a couple of touchdown passes from Shedeur in that game, and there's a lot of, see, I told you so, shouldn't have dropped to the 5th round. I haven't talked to my buddy Mel Kiper about this, but remember Mel being apoplectic on draft day that Shedeur kept falling down the board. He had him as, one of the top 5 players taken, and clearly that didn't happen. But this is what Daniel found when he broke down the tape of what Shedeur did over the weekend in a game against the Lions.
Thought it went really well. I honestly don't know if it could have got any better. I know it's the first preseason game. I know he's played 50 snaps. I know this, that, whatever. A lot of noise surrounding. Hey, did you like his intro? Did you like his walk? And did you like this? Right. He wanted to keep it about football. And boy, like his first throw, Tom, he threw a slant route about 100 miles per hour to his right. He was amped up. He was juiced up. He settled in nicely. He played with a poise that maybe I haven't seen him play with in a long time. And it's his first game. I get that. But he was making checks at the line of scrimmage. Yes, he missed some throws. Yes, he put the ball in harm's way twice. Should have had 2 interceptions. But he didn't take a lot of sacks. He was a lot more athletic than I remember him being at Colorado. And people are like, well, didn't you watch the game at Colorado? I'm like, yeah, he didn't really run a lot. He was out there spinning. He was doing this. And then the touchdown throws were great. Like the one you fake to the right, it's a bootleg to the left. You put it in a really tight window throw, moving to your left as a right-handed quarterback. That's very difficult to do. And then his pocket movement on the last touchdown right before the half was excellent. You got a blitzer off the weak side. The running back comes over, pins him. He moves over to the right and throws an absolute dot between safety and corner down low. Now, there's some things to fix, but when you watch him, you could see, okay, I could see the opportunity arise where, hey, you're getting more 2 reps. You're getting more 3 reps. So it was a really promising start, in my opinion.
The upside on Shedeur Sanders, the thing that a lot of coaches and scouts, when they watched him, everybody talked about he is really accurate. That is a strength for him going back the days of Colorado. That showed up there. He's really tough. He didn't take a ton of sacks, which was one of the concerns, was just how long is he holding the ball. I'm curious when you're watching him, and again, I know this is preseason, nobody's scheming, it's probably pretty vanilla here, but do you see him getting 1 to 2 to 3? Do you see him progressing? Because a lot of the throws he was making, it seemed like, at least in the early stages, were, okay, they're telling me just get the ball out of my hands, take the snap, get it out.
I thought from the first quarter to the second quarter, you saw a big improvement in going through progressions. Like he would throw some RPOs and it'd be the first read or run. There's a couple times where they were rushing 5 and he was like, hey, it's man-to-man. Yes, this guy's open. I don't really quite trust it yet. Let me run around. And that was on the 13-yard scamper around the right edge. The one I loved the most was, we talked about it, was the second touchdown throw before the half. They have 2 out routes to the left, and they have a double post concept to the right. He has to read this left to right. So he reads the out route to the field or to the boundary. It's not there. He comes into the stick route, which is a 5-yard out route, but didn't like it. He moved through the progression to the through route, and the through route in a double post, it's supposed to grab the middle of the field safety. And when that happened, he moved right, got to his 4th progression, Tom, and it was a perfect throw. So he did settle in, and there was a couple throws in the second half that were really good too. I think a lot of college quarterbacks, really other than Jaden Daniels that I've studied coming out, they lock onto 1 or they lock onto 2. And it's taken time for Shedeur to learn a true NFL offense, because Kevin Stefanski isn't like, hey, just throw this guy. You have pre-snap reads, you have post-snap reads, you have checks, you have run game checks, you have all this stuff. So I think the way they're bringing him along, I think it's been really good.
So how much grain of salt with all these guys, not just Shedeur, but obviously we saw Jackson Dart play really well. How much is just somebody who's experienced that? You know the difference between preseason football and regular season football. How much of a caveat do you take anything we see, good or bad, with this time of year?
There's definitely a grain of salt, because when you look at preseason and you look at everything that coaches do to get ready for preseason, I mean, I've been on multiple teams, played a lot of different areas, was a journeyman backup quarterback, and every first preseason game I played in, it was a set amount of plays that was our training camp plays. So I'm like, well, they run cover 2 and we're running this against cover 3. They're like, just figure it out. And so I think that's what they're doing on defense too. But I don't want to take away, and I want to be able to celebrate what they were able to do, because you break these guys down. We watch these guys, fans watch these guys, teams watch these guys in college, and you have a big break, you have the draft, you have all this hoopla. Shedeur Sanders was the story of the draft, right? Jackson Dart, I thought, was one of the stories. Giants moving back up to 20 to get him, all this stuff. But then they actually get to go out there after 4 weeks of training camp or 3 weeks of training camp, and they actually get to throw a football in a real game. So real game reps matter, and it's just taking advantage of that opportunity to put yourself in the best position to move up the depth chart.
That's Chase Daniel, and thank you to Scott Lynn for fact-checking me. I should have I picked this up anecdotally while I was on vacation. Should have checked more. No, this was against Carolina that Shedeur Sanders played over the weekend. The game I was referencing was between Detroit and Atlanta that was suspended because of an injury. But regardless, that's the breakdown from Chase Daniel, and that would be promising, and that will fuel the told you so people. They screwed him. He didn't help himself either. Like when he told the Giants, I'm not going to bother interviewing with you because I'm not still going to be on the board when you get there. Things like that. So, and again, it's the first exhibition game. Let's see. The great August hero, Babe Laufenberg, who was so beloved here for leading comebacks, never took a regular season snap for the Redskins. So let's pump on that. The other thing that you may have picked up what Daniel said, he said most rookie quarterbacks, not Jaden Daniels, lock on one receiver when they come into the league. That tells you that they got something really special here. This is interesting because the NFL almost always wins these things, and they can out-lawyer you, which they're very successful in doing. But this is a big win yesterday for John Gruden, as the Nevada Supreme Court sided with him in his lawsuit alleging that the NFL leaked damaging emails to the media before he resigned from the team in 2021. Now, if you remember this, and if you read the Don Van Natta reporting on this, Dan Snyder was under the gun there. This is when the Washington Post, it was a year into the Post doing all that reporting on the toxic culture and all the sexual harassment in the organization, and it led to flushing some people out of there like Larry Michael and a couple of scouts and people, who were involved in this kind of harassment that was going on. And he was looking to save himself, Snyder. And he thought, according to what Van Natta reported, that he would leak some emails between John Gruden and his then-fired executive, Bruce Allen, which some racist and misogynist things were said. And the reason that Snyder did that was because the word around the league was that Gruden, who then was coaching the Raiders, was hated. The league wanted to get him out, and Snyder thought he would curry favor with Roger Goodell by getting these emails out, that he would leak them, even though Tanya Snyder denied that they leaked them. Well, okay, fine. She wasn't in a courtroom. She denied that. So anyway, this all got out, and this is what led to Gruden being forced to resign from the Raiders in 2021. Now, what the Nevada Supreme Court said, and it was a 5-2 ruling, they did not determine whether or not the league had leaked the emails, but they found that the league's decision to force his complaint into arbitration, and that was overseen by Roger Goodell, the target of Gruden's civil lawsuit, was unconscionable. And this has been the story of the NFL for decades. Oh, Roger Goodell issues punishment. What do? You appeal. Well, who do you appeal to? Roger Goodell. And so, the courts went, this is unconscionable. This is not right. And in the ruling, the justices wrote, by its own unambiguous language, the NFL Constitution no longer applies to Gruden. If the NFL Constitution were to bind former employees, the commissioner could essentially pick and choose which disputes to arbitrate. Right. Because this was, again, a civil suit after he was fired. So you can't have the one who issues the punishment being the judge and jury in this, according to the court. Now, the league can appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, and maybe they can out-lawyer Gruden in that and perhaps win. Gruden has said he will not take a settlement in this. He wants scorched earth on the NFL. Gruden's lawsuit also alleges that Goodell and the league pressured the Raiders to fire Gruden by leaking emails containing racist, sexist, and anti-gay comments that Gruden sent when he was an on-air analyst at ESPN. Oh, that's another important point of this. When he was exchanging these emails with Bruce Allen, he was working for ESPN. Not that it excuses what was said in those emails, but he was not a coach at the time. So that's maybe a small point in this, but it's another point. He's looking for monetary damages, alleging that the selective disclosure of the emails and their publication by the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times ruined his career and endorsement contracts. Also, there's reason to believe that Dan Snyder leaked it to those two publications specifically, that he wasn't dealing with the Washington Post because they were going after him, obviously. So he was going after national publications, or Wall Street Journal is, and to some extent the Times is as well. So be interested to see where this goes. But, the NFL doesn't usually lose these kind of things. They can spend enough money to out-lawyer you, and that, I'm sure, will be some of the strategy behind this. Could they settle with him? Maybe. Could they make Gruden an offer he can't refuse? I think he realizes his days coaching in the NFL are over. He's now working for Barstool. He's got, some other outlets that he does for football. I would think, especially with where the money is now for college football, I think Gruden's going to wind up as a college coach, and maybe the test case will be Bill Belichick with North Carolina this year. So that could be a telling thing as to where that goes. But very interesting development, which was totally unexpected because the league just doesn't lose these things, and they win. They got a big loss yesterday, chalked up to John Gruden. Not over yet, but it could go to the U.S. Supreme Court if the league decides to send it in that direction. So if you have been following what's been going on last couple of weeks with the NFL and its media partners, there's been somewhat of a merger that has happened. It's not done yet. It's going to take a little while before it's all buttoned up. But I don't quite know how the NFL lost money on this, but the NFL Network was not a moneymaker for them. So ESPN, which is in that business, has bought the NFL Network. Like, the NFL Network properties are going to go over to ESPN. The league is going to own 10% of ESPN, which seems conflict of interest, but that sort of sailed. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything. And to be fair, there are excellent reporters with ESPN like Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham who write exposés on the NFL, so they hopefully will be able to continue their work. But it does seem like the line continues to blur, which, is nothing new when it comes to journalism. But anyway, that's the plan there. Now there's some questions because the Redzone channel has been part of the NFL Network. So you heard some things like, oh, well, I guess the Redzone channel is going to go over to ESPN and we're going to get nothing but Stephen A. Smith. No, Stephen A. Smith would be terrible at that. And that's not going to happen. He's got other platforms. Scott Hansen has turned this into a big enterprise for him. He's done very well with it. It was not started by Hansen. It was started by Andrew Siciliano, who started it on DirecTV. And then about 5 years later, the NFL Network launched it. And I must say, it's pretty much all I watch outside of Commanders games. I love the Redzone channel. And Hansen does a really good job of taking you from game to game. Now that it's seemingly owned by ESPN, though not yet, what does this mean for this upcoming season? Because I'm used to going to, I think it's channel 835 to watch it. It's a separate channel on I have Fios, and it's a separate channel, and it is a go-to on Sundays. As soon as the Commanders game is over, or I guess this year I'll be watching a lot more Red Zone than ever before because the Commanders don't have very many 1 o'clock games. But Scott Hansen has done this and will continue to do this with the new contract. The question is, where are you going to see it? This was Hansen yesterday with Tom Pelissero sitting in for Rich Eisen on how this is now going to work heading into the 2025 season.
The Disney, ESPN, NFL media deal still requires approval. So let me put it very simply. It's not going to be official this football season.
Quite possibly not next season either.
Possibly. I'm hearing anywhere from a year to maybe even 2 years from right now is when it'll be official. It's got to go through a different regulatory process. Why not? So nothing's going to change this year. Secondly, technically speaking, ESPN did not buy Redzone.
Right.
They have the licensing to Redzone. They did buy NFL Network, or they are buying NFL Network and NFL.com and NFL Fantasy.
And the right to use the Redzone name.
The right to use the Redzone name.
That they can do.
Yes. But let me put it simply. If you think that Red Zone's only going to be on ESPN, NFL Red Zone's only going to be on ESPN this year, no. You will be able to watch Red Zone through your television provider the same way you did last year, provided that television provider, relicensed. If you have any questions at all of where you're going to find Red Zone, we're still going to be around in all the same usual places, but NFL.com/Red Zone, and you can find out, okay, wait, how am I watching every touchdown from every game? And of course, NFL Plus Premium, you can it's cut and dry. You get Red Zone on any device that way. Is that
every
how you watch
Sunday
it?
I'll have a game or two on the TV, and then I will have you in one of my ears on a headphone streaming NFL Plus on my computer, and it's very good.
Yep. So, hey, we're locked and loaded, ready to go for a great season.
Now, there were some other changes last year that people noticed in Red Zone. One in particular I'm thinking of. The experimentation with commercials.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Do we know what direction that's going?
Let me say this. I'm the host of NFL Red Zone. I work my tail off to try and be an excellent host. I endeavor to be excellent when I go on TV. I do not handle the business side of things. The business folks handle the business side of things. They don't consult with me on the decisions that they make. So, let me just say, when it comes to what will happen in the future, when it comes to what's on Red Zone, there is no one on the planet who wants to show you more football than I do. I guarantee it. And I hope people can understand that. So everyone who dives in my mentions to be like, why are you putting commercials on Red? That's not my pay grade.
So you're saying there are commercials.
I very tactfully, there are people who can answer that question, and they're not sitting in this chair right now. I host, they do the business. But I'll tell you this, no matter what hand I'm dealt or we're dealt, I'm going to give you the best experience that I possibly can. The crew and I are ready to go, but truly that comes from above. And I think everyone watching has a boss, probably has a boss in their life. And I do too, and we'll see you September 7 to give you the best that we can.
Okay, but and he did a decent job of dancing around that question. The thing that Scott Hansen starts every broadcast with of the Redzone is 7 hours of commercial-free football starts now. And you got to drop that line. And during the course of the 7 hours, he likes to drop in that, you don't have any commercials here. I don't know exactly how they're going to do this. If they have graphics that certain segments are sponsored, I don't think that's a big deal. But if they are going to commercial breaks to take you away from the action, that kind of defeats what they're trying to do, right? I mean, that's really why you have the Redzone channel, is that you get to see all these great plays live. And what they do there so well is they take you from game to game, and when there's no action, they sometimes have this because the late game window sometimes only has 3 games in it, so everything's stopped at once. Hansen goes through the highlights. They do that. Are we going to have to sit through commercials on this? That's not really what I signed up for. And even I'll use the Redzone channel during a Commanders game where I'll switch over when they are in a commercial. So let's see. I mean, it's not going to kill the product, and it's become really mainstream over the years, but you got to say that this is something that's a lot different than what they've been selling us for, 20 years, right? About 20 years they've been doing this, maybe a little less. So maybe it was 2009 that it started, 15 years, 16 years. I mean, that's not really what that's all about. But we'll see. And then as time goes on, how is this going to be distributed? It is going to be in a separate ESPN channel. That's not this year, but maybe it's next year, the 2026 season. So those things are in play. But it's it's turned into a big enterprise, and I think you got to give Hansen and certainly the people he works with a lot of credit on that. This was something that was in USA Today, and it's a book that DeMaurice Smith has out. DeMaurice Smith, if you don't know that name, he used to be the executive director of the NFL Players Association, and he was replaced in 2023 by Lloyd Howell. And J.C. Tretter, former center and the president of the union, had done some maneuvering to make sure Howell got the job. Well, things have become an absolute mess with the Players Association. If you're not following this, it goes back to what Pablo Torre reported on his podcast a couple of months ago. He found a 61-page ruling from an independent arbitrator, Christopher Downey is his name, from a lawsuit filed in 2022 by the NFL Players Association alleging collusion by the team owners, and that was kept secret from the union. Now, the arbitrator's ruling was that he was not going to rule in favor of the players on collusion, but said that there was evidence there to do it, and there was never any appeal. And the reason that there wasn't an appeal was because Tretter had said some derogatory things about other players, including Russell Wilson, who he had said basically wimped out and had agreed to a contract with incentives rather than a fully guaranteed deal like Deshaun Watson. And that was what the collusion suit was all about, that the players were saying, hey, the owners colluded to make sure that there wasn't going to be a fully guaranteed deal like Deshaun Watson anymore. And they even had an exchange of 2 owners, one from the Cardinals and one from the Chargers. Was it not Dean Spanos, but Spanos' son, and then Bill Bidwell's son. They both inherited their teams, exchanging emails with Bidwell being thanked by Spanos for not guaranteeing all the money for Kyler Murray because they were going to have same situation with Justin Herbert coming up. So there was clear indication of that. Also, it was revealed that Lloyd Howell was a part-time consultant for the Carlyle Group, which is a private equity firm that was investing in NFL teams. Clear conflict of interest. Well, Howell is out. Tretter is out. They have David White as the interim director, and DeMaurice Smith, in promoting his new book, Turf Wars, The Fight for the Soul of America's Game, talked about what's going on here. And he would not, go as far as to say, hey, this is an absolute mess. He's not going to do that. He also said that if asked, he would not return as executive director. But he said about the 11-year collective bargaining agreement that they had worked out, he said, first of all, 2030 is not as far off as you might think. He said the changing media landscape is interesting, but I think the most pressing issue is how do you come and take a group of players who haven't been in a fight and teach them about the labor union? And he talked about the history of this, going back to Reggie White, whose challenge ultimately opened up the door for free agency and so forth. Now, right now, the players are getting 48% of revenues, and that brings the salary cap up to $279 million a year. It's gone up, and it's really going to go up once they open up their media deals, which I believe they can do in 2029. This push by the league to go to 18 games, which is certainly going to happen. Initially, they pushed back on 17, but the players accepted that, so we have that. And then also in the book, Smith recalls and this should have been a real warning sign for the Players Association. Smith recalls a frosty exchange with Lloyd Howe during the transition. Smith said he wrote a letter for his successor and planned to leave it on his old desk in the tradition of U.S. presidents, but had second thoughts after his single interaction with Howe. He folded up the letter and stuffed it in his pocket. And, he said, look, I'd like to be a resource. I wish I had Gene Upshaw. He replaced Upshaw after he died. But that wasn't available. So we'll see if the NFL Players Association can get its act back together, but be interested to read what DeMar Smith said about the mess that they seem to be in at this time. All right, coming up, it was 47 years ago today that the worst injury in the history of the NFL occurred. I'm not talking about the player who died for the Detroit Lions in 1970. He wasn't hit. That was hardening of the arteries. This was a hit that took place on the field that left Darryl Stingley as a quadriplegic. And the story of Jack Tatum, the hit, and what followed is fascinating. We'll get to that next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You know, it is amazing to me watching football games week after week. I watch dozens and dozens of NFL games over the course of the season, just about every play for the Commanders. And I just sometimes marvel that the injuries aren't worse than they are. Sure, they're plenty of blown-out knees and Achilles and shoulder injuries and concussions and so forth. But the number of paralyzing injuries, not that one is good, but there haven't been that many. It's really surprising, and there have been a few over the years, like Dennis Byrd for the New York Jets, who was able to get up and walk again. He wasn't able to play football, but miraculously, after what would have been a paralyzing neck injury, was handled incredibly well by the trainers, and he was able to walk again. You think of Damar Hamlin a few years ago, who literally died on the field, but they revived him, and he's still playing for the Buffalo Bills. I saw him in the Hard Knocks series last night. But there have been a couple of paralyzing injuries. There was a guy named Utley who was with the Detroit Lions, and he did get paralyzed on the field, though not from a hit. It looked like he just landed wrong on his head. Mike Utley is his name, and he was actually a college teammate of Mark Rippon. I interviewed him once at one of those golf tournaments that they do. He's very upbeat. He's been in a wheelchair now for 34 years. I think it happened in 1991, but has gotten on with his life and is doing other things and has full use of his arms. The worst on-field injury that ever occurred happened on this day in 1978. It was an exhibition game at the Oakland Coliseum between the Raiders and the New England Patriots. Now, the Raiders in those days, at that point, were they defending champs? No, they were like a year removed from being champions. They had won in January of 1977, and this would turn out to be John Madden's last year as coach. But they had a reputation that was well earned that they were going to knock the snot out of you. And the biggest hitter on that team was Jack Tatum. Jack Tatum had been a ferocious linebacker at Ohio State, and he transitioned to defensive back with the Raiders, and he would deliver a blow, and sometimes it was an intimidating blow. And the rules were a little bit different then, quite a bit different. If you watch tape of that period of time, you could hit guys over the middle. Now you can't really do that as much. And Jack Tatum was famous for delivering big hits over the middle to defensive backs. And what looked like a routine play as Steve Grogan overthrew Darryl Stingley, who was one of the best receivers in the league at that point. And as he stretched for the ball, Tatum collided with him. But it was with his shoulder, not with his head. So it was a legal hit. It was a legal hit then. Now it would be considered a penalty for hitting a defenseless player. Well, it turned out to be the most devastating hit that anyone has ever seen on the football field because Darryl Stingley was paralyzed and only regained partial use of his right hand. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And there was no penalty that was called on the play. It was, by all accounts, a clean play. It just had a very tragic ending. And what followed is still controversial to this day. Both Darryl Stingley and Jack Tatum are now gone. They died at young ages, Stingley at the age of 55 and Jack Tatum at the age of 61. Anyway, a year after the hit, the 78 season, he spent that rehabbing. And on September 3rd, 1979, the Patriots opened up the season at home on Monday Night Football. Darryl Stingley was there in a wheelchair in the press box and was applauded by the adoring fan base of the New England Patriots, with Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford describing the action on ABC.
This is a moment to remember as one pans the stands, looks at these people, one realizes what an athlete can come to mean to a population. And this has been a remarkable athlete, number 84, Darryl Stingley. And it happened on August 12th, a year ago, the collision with Jack Tatum.
Not only were the fans applauding his teammates on the sidelines, facing up to the press box, applauding number 84.
And at halftime, they aired a taped interview that Cosell had done with Stingley, who was remarkably upbeat.
During the long period of rehabilitation, Darryl, what has sustained your spirits? Because they're obviously very bright.
Well, like I said before, the response of the fans from here in New England, the mail in which I get from all parts of the country, and, you know, people, all sorts of well wishes, wishing me well and wishing that I can get back. It's just heartwarming to know that many people across the country feel that way about you, and you feel like you're sort of obligated to them. And in a sense, you know, it makes me feel like the best thing I can do is someday make myself get better and get back up on my feet and walk and make all those people happy.
The hope doesn't die that will happen.
No, it never dies. There's always hope. Others have said to me that the sky's the limit as far as what I can regain, and you know, I believe in that, and I believe I have a tremendous faith in God that there's a possibility that, you know, maybe He wanted me to experience what I'm experiencing for a reason. But I do anticipate regaining some of the motion and the movement in my body so that I can go on to live what you may call a normal life.
Now, he did have a remarkable life after that, considering what happened to him, but he only regained use of his hand, his right hand, partial use, and that was to drive the motorized wheelchair. He did get a position with the Patriots for life, helped them with player personnel, watch tape and things like that, but his life was never the same. He went from being one of the best athletes in the NFL to being unable to walk and needing full-time care for the rest of his life. Now we get to the controversial part of this, and to this day, with both men gone, it's just tragic, not just what happened on the football field, but what happened afterwards. And this is where Cosell gets to the question, which we need to explore right here.
Jack Tatum has said that he tried to reach you through your teammates, through the Patriots, through your attorney. Do you have any knowledge of such efforts on his part?
The only thing I know about that, Howard, is they tried to reach my attorney once back in February. I believe it was February of this year. And they never returned the call, or they never tried to make contact any time after that.
So February would have been 6 months after the injury, and they just never happened. Now, this was Jack Tatum interviewed at the same time about the time of this game by a reporter from KGO in San Francisco. And if you're looking for apology here, you're not going to find it.
Incident like this bothers you, but, it's one of those things where you have to just keep playing and you try to work it out within yourself. And, I think I reached the point where I finally worked it out, and I'm playing real good ball again for the Raiders. And been elected team captain, so all the young guys are looking to me for a little leadership. So, I have to get back to playing real good ball, so I can't let it affect me anymore.
It did affect your play last year?
Sure, it affected my play. Tragic accident like that's going to affect you, if you're involved in it. It's really going to affect you. And I think it hurt my play a little bit last year.
Jack, is there anything you'd like to say right now to Darryl Stingley? If you could talk to him right now, what would you say?
I'd just like to, wish Darryl, a full and speedy recovery and send him my best wishes.
Best wishes. No apology there. Legal hit. That's true. But, you ruined a man's life in that moment. There's got to be some type of an apology, you would think. Now, there's more to this story, and the John Madden part of it is very, very interesting. After the game, Madden went to the hospital to at least hopefully, I don't know if he was going to be conscious, but at least, show up and show Darryl Stingley that you care. Well, Madden shows up at the hospital, and he found that he was the only visitor there. There was nobody from the Patriots there. So they didn't have cell phones in those days. I don't know how he was able to do it, but he was able to make contact with the team's charter plane. I guess he was able to get through to the gate, and he said, hey, there's nobody here at the hospital from the Patriots. So they returned the plane to the gate, and then somebody showed up from the team. Gene Upshaw, who was a player with the Raiders then, he also became a regular visitor to the hospital. And from what I've read, John Madden showed up every single day that Darryl Stingley was hospitalized in Oakland. And to his death, Jack Tatum never did. There was a settlement that was reached with the NFL and the Patriots, agreeing to pay all of Stingley's medical expenses for the rest of his life, as well as his children's education. And he's had some offspring who played football, including his grandson, who got drafted by the Houston Texans. But here's how long this thing went. Darryl Stingley died in 2007. And Jack Tatum died in 2010 at the age of 61. So they've both been gone more than 15 years. But in 2003, they had the 25th anniversary of this, and HBO did a piece on this, and Chris Carter was sent to interview Jack Tatum. And 25 years after the incident, 25 years after this tragic incident, Jack Tatum had never made contact with Darryl Stingley. There was no apology. And this was Carter, trying to find out why.
A lot of people say in this case, from a human standpoint, you not reaching out to him, that's where you failed.
No. I have to take exception to that because we tried for 3 or 4 times to reach out to contact Stingley, but every time we were shut down by people around Darryl, his attorneys and, different people, and we were never able to talk to Darryl. And at some point, I just said, well, I can't beat my head against the wall forever. And I just let it go.
It's still hard to understand why you guys haven't talked. Do you think eventually you guys will talk?
Eventually, I'd love to. But like I said, I can't beat my head against the wall forever.
They never did. Never talked. It would seem to me that Jack Tatum should have made an effort to talk to him. Going through the attorneys, he had a residence. You could have flown to his house. You could have shown up at his house. You could have done something. You could have written a letter that maybe opened the door. But no, that's not the way it happened. So, very tragically, Darryl Stingley died at the age of 55, maybe from complications. They said he had pneumonia from his being a quadriplegic, and Jack Tatum also had some health issues at the end of his life. I believe at one point they amputated his leg, but again, no remorse. He doesn't, it was not an illegal hit. That's one thing, but still, it's an absolute tragedy that happened on the field that day. According to Wikipedia, the incident affected Tatum personally, and for several years, according to his close friend John Hicks, who was a player as well at Ohio State, it made him something of a recluse. According to John Madden, it was something that ate at him his whole life. I would say good. I would say it should have eaten him up, and he should have done something about it. Stingley later said that he had forgiven Tatum. They had wanted, in this HBO piece that you just heard from Chris Carter, they wanted to have Tatum and Stingley there together. They wanted to make that meeting finally happen. But apparently at the time, there was a book that was written by Jack Tatum that was called, and this was typical of him, this was a 1996 biography, Final Confessions of NFL Assassin Jack Tatum. And Stingley worried that Tatum's effort to contact him were profit-motivated, so he did not get together with him. Just a horrible thing. And, again, I would say they've done some things to try to make the game safer, and sometimes we have injuries that look like they could result in paralyzing injuries, and they're able to treat them well on the field, and at least, sometimes the player may not be able to play football anymore, but he can walk again. But the way the hitting happens on the field, whether it's inadvertent or not, whether it's, an intentional hit or whether it just happens to be when two guys are playing and trying to get the ball, that we haven't had more of these, because the game is damn dangerous, and we should always be reminded just how bad it could possibly be when you think about Darryl Stingley and what happened on the field 47 years ago today in Oakland, and both men passing away at a very young age. Very, very, very tragic thing. And as I say about football, it's a guilty pleasure. It really is. And when we did Radio Row for many years at the other station, where we would spend the week before the Super Bowl doing our shows from the site, in the early part of the week, they would always bring around players who had suffered injuries during their career, which altered them in retirement. They were suffering, various aches and pains, and sometimes, debilitating injuries that kept them from working. And you've read all these stories about the concussion settlements and so forth. These guys were looking for money. They to a man, they would say, "Oh, I don't regret playing football. That was the greatest thrill of my life. But now I'm somewhat disabled, and the NFL won't give us, money, won't give us compensation, workman's comp for what we suffered here." And Tom Lavero would say, because this was an NFL-sponsored event, he would say, not necessarily to them, but would say to us, he says, this is like going to the tobacco convention and them bringing around people who have lung cancer. And that's sort of the way it was. So, you can be reminded of just the ultimate in this, the ultimate injury. No one has died, as far as I know, from a hit on the field. But here is a guy who suffered an injury that changed his life in an instant. And sadly, the way it was handled by Jack Tatum is disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. Not an illegal hit, but disgraceful in the fact that he never apologized to Darryl Stingley. All right, Bram is coming up next. He may have some insight on this scrimmage that they've had today in Ashburn and other things regarding the football team as we get ready to start the season. I will be back here tomorrow to give you more, coming up at 9 a.m.